Thanks, Dave. And yeah, the goal is just an in-depth walkthrough of Prepare today. We've got some real data that we're going to use to validate and push a return. I'm going to share my screen quick just to start going into it. So let me know if you can see it. Um, does that look good?
Yep, got it.
All right. Awesome. So I've got a preparation started here in Juno for the boot camp. And I think the first step for this is just getting the documents in. I've got them ready to upload here, so I'm just going to drag off or select them. This management integration, this can be a lot easier too. So once we've got all this selected, let's see, it looks like just got a message that my internet was unstable. So hopefully I'm still on the
Yeah,
screen.
you sound
Um,
good now, Josh. You were cutting out for a
okay,
second, but you're back.
okay. Sounds good. So I'll just give these documents a minute to process here. Like I think it might have gotten cut out, but obviously if you have a practice management solution that integrates with Juno, like Taxstone or some others that are coming soon, this step will be a lot easier and will just be sent over directly from those. But these should just take a few minutes to process. For business returns too, this will be a similar workflow, but we're actually able to pull the documents in through QuickBooks and Xero as well. So that can make for a really smooth integration there to get the source data in.
Yeah, and one quick
As the
comment on that, you can
Mhm.
you can bring things in from QuickBooks or Zero, but you also can bring in a P&L from QuickBooks or Zero if someone shares it to you that way. Um, the yeah, sorry, I know people are talking about the choppiness. I don't hear any choppiness on my end, so it could be your speakers if you're still experiencing choppiness there. Because I'm definitely not hearing any, and the rest of my team isn't either. So it's probably your machine if you're still hearing that. But we can pull in the P&L and the balance sheet from QuickBooks Zero, or if you're going through like TaxDome or Carbon, Canopy, Firm 360, like those are the other integrations that we'll have here shortly. We are going to look to add to that list. I know people have requested Count and Financial Sense. Like there's a couple other big ones we haven't done yet. But we will, eventually we should be supporting all of those. And one quick comment there for folks, and it doesn't have to be a P&L. It can also be like a list of expenses, basically. That would be totally fine. We can really take almost any document, basically, there. The one thing that we can't yet do that we are working on is like a multi-column. So if someone has, let's say like six rental properties and they're all columns, right? Let's like maybe it's classes in QuickBooks or something like that. That is not yet supported, but will be before tax season. That's just like it's a bit of a funky use case where we have to have a UI to tell you what we decided to do with all that information and let you reroute it. So that one just takes a little bit longer. But but that being said, you can bring in all sorts of different documents this way. Sorry, Josh, I'll hand back off to you. I was just covering while you were still a bit choppy.
No problem. Let me know if it cuts out again. But as these are coming through, when you upload docs into Juno, there will be a couple of different statuses that you'll see. The first, it looks like that 1099 INT has come through as validated, which just means that we have a really high degree of confidence in all of the data on that source document there. The other status that you'll see come through is awaiting review, which just means there's a couple of fields. Typically, it's just one or two Juno wants you to take another look at while we're going through it. And the other status that you'll see, this is a good example of it, is not supported here, which just means it's not a form that we support for export. I uploaded some childcare expenses for this one, and actually it looks like, I think because I ran into those internet issues, that a couple of forms got brought in here twice. So I'm going to remove those quickly just to make sure we only have one copy of each. Um, but then as the data comes through, we'll see each form open up here. And then I'm going to show the validation. for a couple of different here. The first is the W-2. Is my audio still good? I feel like I'm still running.
Yeah, you're
Something's
breaking up a little bit there, Josh. You might try to close if you get application. If you certainly if you have an AI application like Claude or something open, I would try closing that. You were choppy just a second there,
okay.
but I can have a look at that real quick, or you might even I guess you're going to have to keep Chrome open. Um, but yeah, for folks there, I'll Joshua, you're looking at that just real
Yeah,
quick. I'll
I'll
jump in
I'll
here
stop
for
the
a
share
second.
really quick and try and get a couple
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Maybe try to share again. The quick comment there for folks. We support any sort of IRS document that you might upload, as well as like we're pulling information off of something like an organizer. You don't need to use a particular template. We'll push some of that information, like medical, charitable contributions, things like that, to your Schedule A. We also will take like a P&L or any list of expenses for Schedule C, E, or F. We don't yet like capitalize the assets related to that if it's coming in off of that. We can pull information off handwritten notes. Um, and we can take, like, even in the case of an organizer or whatever it might be, like, we're not fixing to a particular template basically for anything. So you can really use any sort of format that you want. And then we will also not only take all the extracted information that you expect from like the different box numbers, whatever it might be, we'll help you, and Josh will show this in just a minute, route it to the right place on the tax return as well. So for example, like we can't always tell if a list of expenses is for a Schedule E or a Schedule C. We would ask you basically, we say like, we think this is a Schedule C, and you can reprocess that as a Schedule E, and it would rerun it through the kind of AI system that we have. So Josh, you're good to share again whenever you want if you want to jump back in.
Yeah, sounds good.
We can take yeah, sorry, we can yes, affirmative, can take handwritten notes.
All right. Am I back up here?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So just to dive in now to what the validation screen looks like and a couple of the different options you have here. So for source documents like the W-2s or a 1099 INT, you'll always see the document here on the left-hand side of the screen, and then all of the data that you're extracting will be on the which will to show the state data that's being extracted. So I've got like a state amount for W-2 here listed out.
Yeah, sorry. I think there might be, Josh, I don't know, you're still having issues. So let me take over here. Just Josh, if you would keep running through the I'm still having internet issues on your end. So let me jump in though, just so we can get consistent audio here. But Josh, if you want to keep clicking through, if you can hear me okay, then that'll be fine.
Yeah.
So you've got the original source document on the left, you have the extracted information on the right. And you, again, like any of the IRS documents, Josh, I think you've got one of these loaded, but we also can show you a non-IRS document so you can kind of see Schedule C, E, or F. There's a bit of a different kind of user experience for that. Um, and so I will have Josh pull that up here for just a moment. We
Yeah.
did, by the way, I saw a
Sorry,
quick
Dave.
question about this. Yeah.
I'm gonna stop the share one more time and try and jump somewhere else to do this.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll be right
No
back.
worries. Sorry about the technical issues there, folks. The joy of having a bunch of people running internet on the same thing. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but AI uses an insane amount of internet. I'll go through some of the Q&A stuff there. In extraction, like that takes, you probably saw it with Josh, it takes about 2 minutes. We were running those documents in real time. To do extraction on a typical return, we're extracting a couple hundred values that then we'll ask you for any additional information that we need. And what Josh will show you next is you can push it directly into your tax software. Yeah, we work really well with ProConnect, Lacerte, UltraTax, Drake, and Access. For UltraTax, we don't support virtual office. That is an area where they've made it really, really difficult for us to work. But it works really well if you're not using Virtual Office. So if you're hosting that with Verito or Writeworks or a different service provider, then you'll have a better experience. We just have kind of agreed not to support um, not to support that platform. And but we'll, with each of those softwares, we map to about 7,000 fields. And so, we have the ability to push into and really prepare a huge amount of the return. And then the thing Josh will show you when he jumps back on is also the binder. A lot of these questions are about like what we specifically do and do not export. So we don't do like a driver's license as an example, but we do on the binder, we tell you exactly what is left to do. So when you saw that not supported, kind of label, that is an indication that it's a type of document that we're not going to automatically push into your tax software. So right now, what we support would be anything coming in off any IRS document, both at the federal and state level, as well as your Schedule A items like charitable contributions, medical expenses. We don't yet do like childcare expenses or your driver's license, like some of those edge cases. We will start to actually do some of those things this year, but we don't do them today. But what we do that's super important is in the binder, which Josh, when you jump back on, we can actually go to binder if you want to here. Um, or you could start at like a Schedule C or something like that, whatever you were going to go next. I'm not exactly sure where you were going, but we will tell you exactly what we put in your tax software and what we did not, right? Because obviously, if we just go push a whole bunch of stuff in there and you don't know what we did and did not do, then it's going to take you quite a while to go back and figure that out. So we will tell you in the preparation checklist what's left to do on the return, which is a really important piece of the puzzle there. So, Josh, whenever you want, you can spin back up and take over from there. But hopefully that answered a few of the questions. I did want to say one quick thing. I saw a question about security. We did an entire webinar, and I don't know if my team can go find this, but there was an NAEA webinar that we did on security, a whole hour with the Verito team for 7216 rules and everything around that. So if you want to dive into that topic, if I think Amanda on my team can probably drop that in chat. There's a whole hour on it basically. So you can dive in there. I will at a very high level. I would say like, you know, if you're using this in the process of preparation, which is how most firms think about, this product working, then technically there does not need to be an additional disclosure for using AI in the process of tax preparation. So I haven't seen anyone add Juno specifically to their engagement letter. One call out there is like your tax software, and by the way, your email client and pretty much everything else is already using AI in it. It's not the specific need to disclose where you are using AI. For 7216, the disclosure policies are around where your data is stored, right? So does it go offshore, basically? Is it stored or accessed by an offshore person? And then how the data is being used. And so, there's like usage restrictions for how you can use data, as well as like disclosure requirements for both usage and basically like location of that data. So those would be the key drivers, but there's a whole hour on it. If my team can drop that in, then that'd be great. And Josh, I'll go back to you whenever you want. I talked through like everything else. If you maybe want to show a quick Schedule E and then jump back in on the binder, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Sorry again about all the technical difficulties. Let me know if anything comes up again, but I think I'm in a better spot now as far as internet goes. I did want to show just a couple of more things in the validation screen here. So the state breakdown information for some boxes, like here, I had some state information on the K1, like state wages. There's a little button there to show that. I know it's some small text and can be easily missed, but I just wanted to point it out that if you're looking for that in the validation screen, you'll want to check for those plus signs. And then within the human in the loop screen here, or this validation screen, there's a couple of different filters you can use to help navigate through this and simplify what you're looking for. The first is show only flagged for review items. So this document came through and everything was validated right away. So if I toggle that on, it will hide all of the data. Since this will be best used if there's a form that comes up as awaiting review and you're looking for the different fields. Instead of scrolling through the document and looking for those, you can just toggle this on and it'll only show those. The other box I wanted to highlight is the Show Empty Fields button. I think this one can be really important for documents like this or a K1, where right now we'll only show will only show the fields that Juno has extracted the data for here on the right. But if there's something you want to add in, toggling on this show empty fields will expand all of the other boxes. So for like here, there wasn't anything in box 7 or 8, but if you toggle that on, those will show up now and you can add in data if you'd like to make any changes there. And then the other one in this filter options field is going to be show only tax data. That'll just hide some of the informational items and only show the numbers that Juno's extracting from the forms. The other box here, that's a newer feature, but it's in the top right, is going to be the show history box. So if I make a change to one of these boxes, I'll just make this a round number. The show history log will actually tell you what's been changed on the form. So here we're switching, here I changed W2 box 1 from the cents to a round number here, and it's telling me who made the change, when I made it, and what box it was. So if you're working through Juno with your team, you'll always be able to come back and see what the different changes were here in the validation process. The only document in this batch that came through as a waiting review is that Schedule E. And so I'm going to open that up because the schedule validation process can actually look a little bit different than what it would look like for a more standard IRS form. But we are able to extract data from schedules, whether they're uploaded as like a PDF or an Excel file. We're able to handle all of that. This one, we'll start on the schedule view here, which will just list out all of the data that was extracted from the form. And then there's a toggle down at the bottom of the screen that will actually take you to the source doc itself, whether it's a PDF, which it was in this case, or an Excel file here. And then I think Dave mentioned it earlier, but there is this reprocess feature too for every form. That will help you give Juno a little bit of additional context if we need it on how a form should be processed. I think the most common case we see this come up is with schedules. If there's like an Excel file and first Juno classifies it as a Schedule C, but it really needs to go to Schedule F, you can always give us a little bit more context here and utilize that to tell us exactly what the document type is that we should be looking for in the processing. And actually, I need to validate that. So once you've gone through and reviewed all of the data for a form, you can just validate each field, or you can mark as validated for the whole source document, and the status will update here. I know Dave mentioned the workpaper and the binder. You can always access those at the top of the screen here. The binder, just to open it up, we can maybe dive back into this a little bit more later, but there will just be a consolidated PDF of all of the different forms that were uploaded into Juno. So here you'll be able to see each form, scroll through it. And again, there's like a couple of different levels of markup tools and sign-offs that can be used across your team that can be saved here in the Juno web app to keep track of where each return's at and what's been reviewed on the different forms here. The final thing I wanted to call out then in the web app is going to be the expected documents checklist here. So in this example, I uploaded a prior year return. And what we're able to do with this is look through all of the different source documents that made up that last year's return, compare it to what was uploaded into Juno here, and then we'll call out any variances. So on this one, it looks like there was a K1 that they had on the return last year that isn't in the return this year. So we're letting you know, along with a couple other documents here, that we're still waiting on that document. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a couple of different action items for upload and then remove. So you can either upload the document if you have it, or remove it if it's no longer applicable and you're not expecting it anymore. And then at the top of the screen, or at the top of this little window, there will be a generate email button, which you can use to copy a whole email to send to your clients, or if you want to copy over like this, just the specific forms, you can absolutely do that here too. So I think,
Yeah, one quick comment there for folks that was coming up there, Josh. I just want to voice over for a second. Is
Mhm. Yeah.
love the checklist, by the way. This will be the same. It's the same underlying technology that your practice management systems are using, or Stanford Tax, some of those, right? And I think this needs to be at every touch point as a preparer or a reviewer. If your admin is pushing stuff in here, like depending on the different roles, my theory is that like this list should just be everywhere, basically, right? It should be like in every touch point because so much of to be honest, like so much of the inefficiency around processes with tax preparation is in making sure you didn't miss any documents. So you want it kind of at every touch point. And you might have a different person here than, let's say, like in TaxDome. If your preparer starts in Juno because your admin was pushing things out of TaxDome, like that's actually how my practice worked, then you want it in both places because you don't want them to have to go to a different software in order to grab it. But it doesn't sync directly with the TaxDome list itself, but they should be exactly the same because they're both pulling from the data from the prior year returns. So just hope that is a quick answer for folks. And obviously, really helpful for you if you're not already using a custom checklist. I think that's a huge value add, so that you can just get all the information you need to actually work on a return. So much of the wasted time is like doing 60% of a return and realizing you're missing two documents, and having to start back over. So, anyways, Josh, just wanted to double emphasize that one again.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Dave. And so now we've got all the documents validated. We've checked the preparation checklist. Even though we're still waiting on that K1 for this client, you can always export multiple times from Juno into your tax software. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the export piece. And to do that, I've got the Access integration connected to this account. So that'll be a quick export via the DAT file. But each export for a tax software can look a little bit different. And so we have some more in-depth step-by-step guides in our knowledge base if you'd like to see a walkthrough for your software. I'll just hit proceed anyway on this. And then the first screen that we'll see for the Access integration is going to be to upload a DAT file. Before the call, just for the sake of time, I went through and printed this out. So I'm going to upload that here. And then this screen is going to be really important for mapping data from Juno's Prepare into the existing forms in your tax software. So whether you're in the integration app for some of our other integrations, or you're in the web app with Access like this, you'll see this screen, which will just list out all of the different documents that were uploaded into Juno and let you choose where those land in the software. So for this example, there was an existing W-2 in this return, and I want to map the W-2 that I uploaded into Juno into that existing form. And since we were able to match up the names, it was Bootcamp Corporation for this one. Juno automatically mapped this W-2 into what was existing in the DAT file that I uploaded. All the other options here, there wasn't any other existing data in the return, so I left it on add a new form, which means exactly what it sounds like. We'll just add a new form into the return. And then the other option you'll see in each one is skip. But the key I wanted to emphasize here when you're doing the export would be to check for the existing forms in the return. The language can be like a little bit different just depending on what integration you use, but you'll want to make sure to get the data into the existing forms in the return, and to avoid duplicates, you've got the update or index options selected.
Yeah, and this isn't super complex because you can see like the name. Like normally, it's a really simple match, and our system tries to make the match for you, by the way,
Mhm.
and recommend where it should go. Just FYI. But I do want to say out loud for folks that this is one area with my firm where I didn't do the training I should have done with my admin who was pushing it in. And at first, she was pushing things into different parts of the. She wasn't mapping basically here, and then it's extra time for the preparers because they're having to go move things around. And this is why Juno works concurrently with the user. If you think about like um, some of the systems like I don't know Gruntworks or Filed or pick your competitor, like we're actually the only one right now that's working concurrently with the user. This is exactly why that matters because like you need to put things in the right place so you don't later have to go take your schedule E and delete all of the numbers and go put it back where the prior year was. There's a lot of times where that information is not obvious. And if you put it in the wrong place, you're going to waste a lot of time. So, we think the best architecture for a system is an AI system that works alongside the tax preparer to get information into the right place in your tax software. So that's super important, a big critical difference between us and the way some other folks are doing this. The other piece about working concurrently is, on average, it takes 6 or 7 minutes to kind of go through this process for a typical return. Which is not instantaneous, but you're not waiting 24 hours to get it back. We don't use humans anywhere on our end, so there's nothing that takes like more than a few minutes in the product. The slowest thing is reviewing a tax return, which can take, probably 7 or 8 minutes typically, to do. And by the way, we'll notify you when it's done and all the things you would expect. But everything else is like actually you're kind of watching it go through. We could do an entire we weren't spending so much time with me interrupting Josh. We could do a return here very easily within 30 minutes on this call. Even a really complex return. And in fact, if you're zooming through this thing, like I said, the average is actually closer to 6 or 7 minutes right now, to do a return, and we're doing something like 95% of the data entry on that return. So you're getting really far down the path, but it's not doing 100% of the return. We're all going to have jobs for a long time here because there's just some things that like you made decisions last year that matter for this year's return that AI is just not going to be able to solve because it doesn't have the context. And so it's not a matter of like, is it AI good enough to solve that particular thing? It's a matter of like, it doesn't have the context to make the right decision. And it's therefore like, it will never be solvable. So if you think about the example I always give is like RSUs, where it could have prior year basis coming off a W-2. AI is never going to have the information to know how you treated that last year, what the basis was, your assumption on basis for last year's sales, if you did sell stock last year, and how that flows into this year's return. And so there's like edge cases like that all over the place. But the quick answer is that like I don't see an AI system doing 100% of a return accurately anytime in the near future. But we're going to try to get as close to that as we can. Today we can do about 95% of the fields, and then we'll probably push that to 97 or 98% by the end of the year by adding things like childcare expenses and EV credits and like some of these different items. So, anyways, Josh, the mapping is super, super important there. Just want to call that out for the crew.
Mhm. Yeah. And just to help identify the forms where we've detected existing data and we can see that there's a form in the return that you could potentially map into, if we find existing data for a form type, there will be a little green dot. So for this example, there was only the W-2. So that's the only form that's got that green dot next to it. But just as a visual indicator, I know it's a best practice to just keep an eye out for those dots while you're going through this export. And even though Juno in this example automatically mapped the form since we were able to match things up, you're still 100% in control of this process here and can make any of the changes here that you'd like to. There's a couple more features within this screen that I just wanted to bring up. There's this view button right in the middle that'll, if you click it, it'll bring up the PDF that was uploaded into Juno, just in case if you need to look at the form to make any additional clarifications on how it should be mapped into the return, you can do that here. And then for forms like the 1098s that I've got uploaded, there will be an additional column that populates, and that'll give you the option to select where the form goes in the return. So I know you'll also see this box with like a 1099 miscellaneous where it gives you some options for how that data should be mapped in the return. But for the 1098s, you can clarify whether it should go to the Schedule A or the Schedule E, just depending on what the property is for. But once we've got everything selected here, I can go ahead and run through the export quick with Access. Again, this will look a lot different depending on the tax software that you use. But for Access, I'll just hit generate dat file here, and that'll save a file to my computer that we can then go upload into the return. As you can see, once we've done the export, there are a couple columns that populate to show that the data has been exported. So it'll say the name and the date that the data was last exported. And then within this screen, there will be this preparation checklist in the top right that'll pop up after the export. And this is something that Dave mentioned earlier, but we really try to clarify what Juno does and also what's left to do after the export. So here, the not supported document that we saw on the previous screen was like a childcare receipt that I uploaded. And Juno let us know that it's not supported and that we won't be exporting that. But at the end of the export, there is this preparation checklist that comes up that highlights these items now that we've done the data entry into our software. And it'll just show up as like a little action item calling out what Juno didn't enter and what's left to do in the return. And it'll give you the amount that you can then go copy and paste into the return there. There's also a little checkbox in these items, so you can check them off and mark it as resolved here. And then these action items are going to sync to the binder as well. I know we took a quick look into it earlier, but when you're looking at this document in the binder now, you'll be able to see that we surfaced this action item since it's not a supported document. And if you check it off here, that will also sync. So be able to see if you or somebody else on your team marked this as resolved. Um,
Yeah, so one quick comment here for folks just to think about, again, like a collaborative work environment, which is really helpful, right? For you think about like we've isolated what's left to do on the return, and then your team, as they do them, can check them off, but it doesn't delete them from anything. It just adds it to the work paper that that is completed, if that makes sense. So you're creating an audit checklist for what's done on the return, not just for what Juno did, but for what your team is doing to finish the return from there, so you got one consolidated kind of work paper. I saw a question about multi-state K1s. We do handle multi-state K1s. There are times where we don't enter the information coming off the footnotes. It depends on what information that is, but we'll tell you basically in the preparation checklist what's left to be done on those items. Like, hey, we saw something in the footnotes of the K1 that needs to be addressed. Here's what we recommend in terms of instructions for how to complete that process. So be aware of that. So we're trying to handle really like the full prep of the return, even the things we don't do, by telling your team exactly what needs to be done to complete the return.
yeah. And I guess we've gone over the preparation checklist. So now I think the thing left to do, if it sounds good to you, Dave, is I'll just run the export and then maybe we can jump into some of the other Q&A.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
uh, the export with Access is going to start in the return manager. We've downloaded that dot file. So now I'm just going to do a tax data import, check the box here, and then grab the file that we downloaded from Juno, and then I can validate this and import it. This is a pretty quick process. With Access, I always like to jump over to the batch manager and check the status of the import here. Normally, by the time you get over here, it's done. It looks like here it was ready to run. So we'll just need to give that another second. And here it looks like the tax data import has been complete. And so once that's done, you can just jump over to the return and open it up. And I can click into a couple of the forms here just to show the data that we brought in. Um, We'll just give it a second to load here. But then I know one of the forms we added in was like that W-2, and you can see it here. Is there anything else, Dave, that you wanted to add in here? Should I jump back into the web app?
Yeah, I think on export it looks different for every platform, as you guys can imagine. If you want to see specifically that for your platform, let the team know if you haven't already. I think we have a mix of some users and potential customers on here. So if you've got it, obviously, if you're using it, then you know what it looks like. And by the way, go back in there. We're constantly improving our export across these different platforms. There's really not a whole lot to see with like Lacerte and Access. They're both data file exchanges, which means like it happens in the background basically, and you kind of sit there like nothing. There's nothing to look at all. In ProConnect, it's a browser agent, so it will pull up a new browser window and do it in the browser window. And then for UltraTax, it's going to do like RPA, so it basically will run on your machine as it's doing that. It's using source data entry. We will come off source data entry. We're already building that now, but they're going to discontinue that at the end of the year. We get that question a lot. If you're running on a virtual server, we're going to have an app on your server if we need to have an app at all. If you're running, on a desktop, like we have an app on your desktop that will run there, because if your files are on your desktop or they're on a local server, we have to be in that environment to have access to those files. So basically, the long and short of it is like, export is typically taking somewhere between 30 seconds and maybe 90 seconds for most returns. And the way it works is really dependent upon the tax software that you have. We also will be moving to an API with ProConnect here in the next few weeks. So super excited about that. That'll be a complete background process. So then like you will actually never use our desktop app. You should be able to run everything through the browser. And that's already the case as well for Access today, that you're really only using the browser, not the desktop app. But I think that covers exports. Josh, if that anything I missed on that while I was chatting? you thought of?
No, I didn't. Well then, I guess this is the end of the export, and I think what we were hoping to get through today. So I can stop the share, and we can dive into some of the other questions.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, let me go gather some of the questions here. Um, All right. Sorry, I'm going to go to the bottom of these things. Yeah, I mean, in terms of adding features, one thing we'd love, and I saw this question before, I'm sure it got answered already, but we have a community called Modern Tax Pros that is for folks using our software, and we love getting feedback from folks on like the roadmap and what we're building in the future. Right, we're constantly adding to the functionality that we have. This year, as an example, we added business returns, we added the checklist, and we added support for Schedule A as well as charitable contributions, like and a million other things also probably that I'm forgetting, but like those were just some of the major things that we have added like in the last 6 months. So this won't be like QuickBooks where they promised check images for 12 straight years before they finally launched it. We are building at a really, really fast clip here. So love hearing that feedback from folks. I think as we get towards the end of the year, one of the things we're working on is expanding our coverage of fields. So we want to be able to do more of the return. In improving the accuracy of like reviewer as an example, which we'll cover in the next boot camp, and making sure that that is like, I'd like for that to be better than like even the average reviewer in the industry. And I think that's feasible within the calendar year. But there's certain ways that you have to work with AI to make that happen that are, it's not a simple thing to do. And so that's something that we're working on really aggressively is like, how do we get close to 100% coverage of the return? And then the other piece I'll kind of allude to here at a high level, and you guys will see this when we launch it the next couple sprints, which will be like next 6 or 8 weeks, is we also will have a bit more interaction ability as you go through the product to be able to work with us on what we're exporting, and that will be part of how we expand the fields that we map into. So we might say like, "Hey, we see an EV credit. We think it should go here in ProConnect. Do you want me to go ahead and put the data there, right?" And then you can say yes, and off we would go and put the data into ProConnect. So that like being able to actually like have this thing finish more of the return and be able to talk back and forth with it, I think would be really helpful. And that is the direction we're going. The other quick thing I'll say is like from a process perspective, because we don't need validation on most source documents these days, we also are moving towards listening for files as opposed to people pushing in files. And we will have an update coming on that before the end of the year with the practice management software where we can continuously listen basically for those documents and start to pre-populate some of that. So in terms of our roadmap, like those would be the big things there on the roadmap. We also will look at like 990s. I saw comments about 990s and 709s and some of the other returns. I think we're probably more likely to continue to expand 1040 coverage first before we take on a new return type. But I do think, those things are definitely on the roadmap. It's just a matter of like where we get them. I don't know if we'll get that before tax season, but we'll certainly expand the 1040 coverage very significantly. Um, Perfect. I'm just looking for some of these other comments. Josh, anything you want to respond to here? I'm going to scroll up through some of the questions as well to see if there's anything I haven't answered.
Yeah, I saw one in the Q&A about IRS transcripts, and we are currently able to read those. So I just wanted to call that out. I responded to it there, but just wanted to mention it here.
Yep. That was a request from a customer that we got that we added a couple months ago. And just one quick comment there, folks, for people that have been monitoring this, our technology is changing pretty regularly, and if you're using ChatGPT or Cowork, you will probably notice this as well. Like every few months, there's material improvement in the product itself, both the performance, the reliability, the speed, right, the amount of coverage that we have on a 1040. So you do, like, ironically, with AI products, you do have to check back in over time to make sure that you understand what is improving and like what the latest product does. So you're always welcome to check back in with our team. If you're an active customer, you can connect with your success rep and just be like, "Hey, it's been a few months since I've had, a deep dive. Can you get back on with me and kind of show me what's new?" Like we have a whole team of people that can do that for you. We don't charge for that service. We're all trying to figure out what the right resourcing looks like for a firm to enable the continuous learning required by a product that's changing all the time. So, to say that a different way, like the human element of this is something that we at Juno are like really trying to figure out like how do we enable learning for your team. And like part of that's going to be boot camps where we do more of this. Part of it's going to be our help center where we have like thousands of articles right now of like specific things you need to do if you're trying to like export and you're stuck at a specific step. Odds are we have a help article if we've ever seen that pop up in the past. Part of that is product improvements and making it easier to use for you guys, right? And so as we kind of bring chat into more parts of our product, hopefully that will make it even easier to use. As we improve like the binders based on feedback we get from customers, that makes it easier to use. But no one's like totally solved this thing yet. Like even the CoWorks of the world or the GPTs of the world, like are still figuring out their pricing and their go-to-market, like all this stuff. Like people don't know yet how to really build a successful AI-based software company. Even the folks that are adding like tens of billions of dollars a month in run rate revenue are still playing around with like, I don't know if you guys have noticed the different levels of GPT or whatever it might be, like they change constantly. The pricing, the credits, right? How everything works is changing. They both launched harnesses that like Cowork and Codex, right? For those platforms that are a significant diversion from like just using the model directly. So they've got logic built around it. In the same way we're doing that, we're trying to make it simpler for you because we are purpose built for tax preparation. But I just want to say out loud that like this is an evolution for all of us, and we're all on that journey together. And so if our team can get better, like please do give us feedback as we go. We are always interacting with our customers. Like I probably talked, on webinars with more than 500 firm owners a month and constantly getting feedback basically on those webinars about what we're doing, security questions, the hot topics that are coming up. It's really, really helpful for us to keep a pulse on the market. If we, love the feedback that you guys give us here, even if it's questions that you're asking, it's just really helpful for us. Okay. Sorry, I went off on a rant there. Josh, any other questions you want to jump in on? I'm starting to go through some of the more recent ones.
Yeah, there was just one about whether files could be uploaded all in one consolidated PDF versus everything split out into individual documents. You absolutely can upload it all in one combined PDF. I just had everything split out for the demo, but if you upload it all in one PDF, we'll be able to split out the different source document types and schedules.
Yeah, you don't need to put them in a specific order. I know, like with SurePrep, you got to put the K1s at the end. Like, there's nothing like that that you need to do. We want the document processing to be like zero work for the staff. We also have a setting where we will remove blank pages. That's an optional thing. Sometimes people want to count the pages and make sure they're exactly the same number of pages. So there's a few client like firm options there that you can select on how you want your binders to work. We didn't go through in detail the annotation, but also like there's ways to annotate. There's a calculator. There's like all the things that you might want to do in those work papers. The one comment I'll make there is like, as we automate more and more of the tax return, you want AI to be able to update those work papers because it will save your team time and it provides a more consistent approach. I do think the work paper itself or the binder, whatever we want to call it, is going to morph over the next couple years. We've mapped to both customer feedback that we've received as well as like what SurePrep uses because we have a lot of firms that come over from SurePrep to try to just meet people where they are. But I think some of the annotation like will start to go away as you have an AI system that does a better job of entering that information. So if you guys have feedback on the binder in particular, that's an area I'm always really interested in because I think we're all discovering what the workflow looks like when you're dealing with like significant automation. And depreciation. So like normally, I see one question on depreciation that I want to comment on. We don't normally depreciation comes in from the tax software, and so we're pulling it from your tax software in on a business return or a partnership. We do pull it back in Reviewer, and we update like your journal entries for depreciation as an example. So we do pull back in depreciation from the draft return in that case, but we don't calculate depreciation from our software. We don't want to duplicate the functionality of like the fixed asset module that you typically have in your tax software. So we're kind of trying to stay out of that process, but we will tell you like even one thing I think is super cool. If you upload a balance sheet and you've got an increase in the balance of an asset account, it will say like, hey, I see that your buildings went up. Like you should consider, that there might be a new asset here that needs to be capitalized and depreciated. So we do like give you instruction on what needs to happen, but we don't yet put things in your fixed asset module for you. That's something we may be doing by the end of the year. I'm not quite sure how far we'll get on that functionality, but I think it's an area where there's a lot of other decisions that need to be made, like what is the asset, right? And sometimes you don't have the information you need from the QuickBooks file to know what that new asset is. And so we won't always be able to solve that problem. That will be another problem that will keep us employed for many years to come. Josh, any you want to jump in on while I try to go up and read?
Not right now. I'm just reading and trying to jump on some of them in the chat here.
Yeah, one quick one. There's a question about re-export. So a lot of times you export multiple times. By the way, that like we don't charge you for a second export. You can export as many times as you want to a client. When you do export a second time, we automatically skip the documents that have already been exported. But we do update the work papers basically every time you upload a new product. So we upload a new form. So if you get like 8 documents and later you go add 2 more documents, it's going to automatically update the work papers. It's going to keep all your annotations, but it's going to add the new documents to the binder. Um, so you will have like a running log there, even if you do multiple exports of what's going on in the work paper. So that's something that we are already doing. That was a beast to build, but basically the work paper will be like an up-to-date audit trail with the latest checklist items based on what you've exported and what you've uploaded. And by the way, like that is tax software specific too. So it's actually looking at like, there are certain things that like Drake may not have a field for that ProConnect does. And it's actually based on the particular software. So we go as far as to say like, here are the inputs that we have, and here's what actually got exported. And we'll even tell you like, hey, we didn't export this because Drake doesn't have like a, code AJ for box 17 on a K1 as an example. So that needs to be entered manually or at least evaluated manually. One quick thing there, reminder, I did see someone saying they were using the feature where you can check things off. Our systems also learn from that, which is really helpful feedback for us. So as you're like, you can actually thumbs down those things now in Reviewer and you can change them. Like you can actually go in and change the text. And when you do that, like our system will learn from your feedback. We don't train based on client data. Obviously, that would not be a best practice for any AI company. But we do listen to user feedback and we actually have an agent go and evaluate like, why did we get this wrong? And then make a recommendation to update our systems. So we have recursive learning built across our entire system. So every time a user makes a change, which is a signal to us that there's an error in the system, we go back and reevaluate that and update the systems, which is super cool. So it's like constantly learning from every user and providing a better, more intelligent system over time. So that is something that's really, really helpful. And by the way, like, if you go in and you're changing something, like one thing that's really cool to think about is the next time you do a return and you face the same issue, like it's probably not going to pop up again. It does take us a bit of time because we have a human review that. We don't want that to be like completely autonomous. We have an accountant actually go review it and accept the change. So it won't happen like if you run it 5 minutes later, but within certainly 24 hours, we typically review those and push them into the product. And so like what's really cool about that is, you imagine the cumulative knowledge across the, 600 plus firms that we're working with right now on how to improve our systems and just like the impact that has on the system performance over time. Josh, any you picked up in here?
There's a couple questions about the UltraTax integration and what's next for that. Dave, do you want to
Sure.
jump on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're working right now on redesigning that integration. It's going to run on a virtual machine. It will be a bit of a different type of that. Also allows us to run it in the background, which is really nice. So we can pre-export, which is something that we want to start playing with. If we pre-export, we can also pre-review the return and make this whole thing a lot more seamless. So that will be coming out in the next by October. We'll have a complete overhaul of that. It will also eliminate the use of source data entry. So Thomson Reuters has made a lot of noise about like, I don't even know how this has come out, but like there's been a lot of questions around like I hear Thomson Reuters is making it harder to work with their software. That's generally true. They never made it easy to work with their software. They have an API that we're not allowed to use, as an example. And so they've always been a closed ecosystem to most people that they think of as competitive, and that would include us for sure. But we will like their elimination of source data entry is not going to impact our performance. And in fact, like we think we will have a substantial improvement in like reduction of export time, as an example, in UltraTax that will be ready here probably in the next like 6 weeks. And I know I've heard from so many people like just the struggles with Thomson Reuters, and they've been the bane of our existence. They've been the hardest to work with of any of the companies in the space by far, and it is pretty frustrating that they're like taking active steps to make it more difficult. But the source data entry piece was never perfect to begin with. It's actually going to be better to import without it. The one thing we were worried about is like just the amount of time for navigating between different screens to put in information. And then also like doing the navigation if you're using RPA can be difficult in different environments. The ability to run that on a virtual machine takes out those, like it eliminates those complications and allows us to run in a consistent environment. So we have a really, really good overhaul coming in October for UltraTax. I think it's going to go from an integration that's kind of okay at the moment to one that's pretty strong for us and maybe even better than some of our other integrations. So working on that right now. We've been working on that already for 6 or 8 weeks, and we'll have that overhauled long before they do away with source data entry. And I think it's supposed to be by next tax season, so in January or February. Anything? I know we're almost at time, Josh. Any other things that caught your eye here? We will also hopefully we responded to you guys. If we didn't for some reason, you can email either contact at juno.tax or sales or support at juno.tax, depending on kind of which team you're looking for. And ask any questions that you want. If you want to go see a demo, if you want to talk to the team, like you can go to our site, sign up for a demo if you haven't already, that way and get on with somebody here in the next couple days. This is a great time of year while you still have extension work to do to really go and try a new product and run through with some real returns the work that you're doing. I find like it's the best way to teach your staff. And I always tell people if you're going to make a technology change, just like do it in the summer, right? When you still got a bit of work, you can squeeze it into Q4 if you want, but please don't do it in February just for the sake of your own staff. I did that to my staff a couple times and they were not super happy about it. If you can get ahead of it, that is really helpful. Our team also onboards a huge amount of people in January and February. So our wait times is the only time of year where it like can take a couple weeks to get onboarded. So I just don't want people to be disappointed if they sign up in January that we might not be able to onboard you for a couple weeks. So we've also got another boot camp tomorrow. So coming up, I think Amanda just dropped those in. We will go through some different things in the product. These are all going to be different topics. And so I think tomorrow is going to be like reviewer, right, Josh? Is that what we're centering on? Um,
Yep.
yeah, so tomorrow will be focused on reviewer and kind of what we do in the review process for returns. So we'll go through, it should be super fun to see. We'll also record this and send this to you guys as well. If you need any other resources, just reach out to our team. And thank you, everybody. I mean, I saw the chat just going off here the whole time. So really appreciate the participation. And with that, we will end it just to keep you guys at time. And yeah, if we can help in any way, just contact our team. Thanks, guys.